I remember the night like it was yesterday. The dark clouds were thick, covering the moon like a blanket, and the only sounds were the crickets and the rustling of leaves. But that was not the scariest part. The scariest part was when I saw my friend, Nuru, standing at the edge of the village, his eyes glowing like fire. Nuru and I grew up together. We were like brothers, always playing, hunting, and laughing. Everyone in the village knew us as the inseparable duo. Nuru had always been a little different, though. He was quiet, often staring into the distance as if he could see things others couldn't. Sometimes, I'd catch him talking to himself, or to the animals in the forest. But I never thought much of it. After all, he was my best friend. One day, when we were about 10 years old, we were out in the forest gathering firewood. The sun was setting, and we knew we had to hurry back before it got dark. Our village elders always warned us about the dangers of the forest at night, where spirits and creatures roamed freely. As we walked, Nuru suddenly stopped and pointed to a small clearing. "Do you see that tree?" he asked. I looked where he was pointing and saw a tall, twisted tree with dark bark and no leaves. It looked strange, out of place among the other green, healthy trees. I'd never seen it before, even though we had walked this path many times. "Yes," I replied, feeling a little uneasy. "There's something special about that tree," Nuru said, his voice sounding different, almost like a whisper. "If you touch it, it will give you anything you want." I laughed, thinking he was joking. "You mean like magic?" "Yes," he said seriously, "but you have to give something in return." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you have to give?" I asked, my curiosity getting the better of me. Nuru turned to me, his eyes dark and serious. "You have to give it your trust." I didn't understand what he meant, but I didn't want to seem scared, so I nodded. "Let's go back," I said, trying to shake off the strange feeling. As we walked back to the village, Nuru kept glancing over his shoulder at the tree, and I couldn't help but feel like something was watching us. The air felt heavy, like we had disturbed something ancient and powerful. I tried to forget about it, but the image of the twisted tree stayed in my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the tree and what Nuru had said. I wondered if it was true, if there really was magic in the forest. But then I remembered what my grandmother used to say, "Not all magic is good, and not all friends are true." Her words echoed in my mind, making me feel uneasy. The next day, Nuru was different. He seemed distant, not his usual cheerful self. He avoided eye contact and spoke in short sentences. When I asked him what was wrong, he just shook his head and said, "Nothing." But I knew something was bothering him. The village felt different too, like a shadow had fallen over it. The usual sounds of laughter and chatter were replaced by whispers and worried glances. As the days went by, strange things started happening in the village. Animals went missing, crops withered, and people fell ill. It started with the goats. One by one, they vanished without a trace. Then the chickens stopped laying eggs, and the cornfields turned yellow and dry, even though it was the rainy season. Everyone was scared, and no one knew what was causing it. The elders said it was a curse, but they didn't know who or what was behind it. Some of the villagers whispered about the old tales of the forest spirits, about how they could be angered if their domain was disturbed. Others said it was the work of a jealous neighbor, someone who had used dark magic. But no one could prove anything. The village healer tried to help, but her remedies had no effect. People began to lose hope. One evening, as the sun was setting, Nuru came to my hut. He looked pale, and there was a strange light in his eyes. He didn't seem like the Nuru I knew. "I need to show you something," he said, grabbing my arm. I hesitated, but he was my friend, so I followed him. He led me back to the clearing where the twisted tree stood. It looked even more sinister in the fading light, its branches like skeletal arms reaching out to the sky. The air around it was cold, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Nuru walked up to the tree and placed his hand on the bark. "Do you trust me?" he asked, turning to look at me. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to trust him, but something inside me was screaming that this was wrong. I don't know, I stammered. Nuru's face twisted into a cruel smile. Then you have nothing to fear, he said, his voice cold and hollow. Before I could react, the ground beneath us started to shake. The tree's twisted branches reached out like arms, wrapping around Nuru and pulling him into its dark trunk. I watched in horror as my friend disappeared into the tree, his screams echoing through the forest. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, watching as the tree seemed to come alive, its bark shifting and cracking. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and I felt a dark presence surrounding me. I could hear whispers, low and menacing, like voices from another world. They were speaking a language I didn't understand, but their tone was filled with anger. Suddenly, the tree released Nuru. He fell to the ground, his body lifeless and pale. But before I could reach him, his eyes snapped open, glowing with an unnatural light. He looked at me, and I knew in that moment that my friend was gone, replaced by something dark and evil. Nuru stood up, his movements jerky and unnatural. You should have trusted me, he hissed, his voice no longer his own. Now you will pay the price. I ran as fast as I could, not daring to look back. I could hear Nuru's twisted laughter behind me, getting closer and closer. My heart pounded in my chest, and my legs burned, but I kept running until I reached the village. I stumbled into the square, gasping for breath, my mind racing. The villagers gathered around me, their faces filled with concern and fear. I burst into my grandmother's hut, where she was sitting by the fire, her old hands knitting a mat. She took one look at me and knew something was wrong. I told her everything, about the tree, about Nuru, about the darkness that had taken him. As I spoke, tears filled my eyes. I had lost my best friend to something I didn't understand, something beyond the world I knew. She listened quietly, her face grave. When I finished, she took my hand and led me to the village elders. Together, they performed a cleansing ritual, using herbs and chants to protect the village from the darkness. The elders gathered in a circle, their faces serious and focused. They burned sacred herbs, and the smoke filled the air, thick and fragrant. They chanted ancient words, calling on the spirits to protect us, to banish the evil that had come to our village. The ritual lasted all night, and by dawn, the village felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. The animals returned, the crops began to grow again, and the people who were sick started to recover. But Nuru was gone, and the twisted tree was never seen again. Some said it was swallowed by the earth, others believed it was taken by the spirits. I didn't know what to believe, but I knew one thing for sure, I would never forget that night. To this day, I don't know what happened to my friend. But I learned a valuable lesson, not all friends can be trusted, and some things are better left alone. Sometimes, the things we desire come at a price too high to pay, and the consequences can be more than we ever imagined. Moral lessons. 1. Be careful who you trust, even those closest to you might not have your best interest at heart. 2. Curiosity can lead to danger, sometimes, it's better to leave things unexplored. 3. Respect the unknown, not everything that seems magical is good or safe. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more like it. And if you want to hear more tales like this one, leave a comment below.